Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Turner, and I want to welcome you to the American Cornerstone Institute's Cornerstone Conversation, where we will be focusing today on the very tremendous topic of opportunity zones. And we have a great panel set forth for you today, including our own beloved Dr. Ben Carson, the chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute and former secretary of HUD. And as we all know, world-renowned neurosurgeon from Johns Hopkins. So Dr. Carson, welcome, sir, and thank you for hosting the Cornerstone Conversation today.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you for the incredible role that you played as the executive director of the Opportunity and Revitalization Council.
Yes, sir.
And thanks to all of our incredible panelists who are with us today. I think everybody listening will have a very good impression of the history of opportunity zones and the future of opportunity zones when this is over. You know, what's interesting is that the previous administration really did want to give people opportunities, particularly people who perhaps have had a lack of opportunities in the past. And therefore, as part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act, opportunity zones were created. And incentives were given to people who had capital gains tax that were unrealized, capital gains that were unrealized, to invest them in those communities that have been economically neglected over the years. And of course, there was a lot of criticism in the beginning, and people were saying, this is just a boondoggle so that rich people can get richer. But as we all know, rich people get richer anyway. And if you can fix a program in place that incentivizes that money to actually go to the places where it never has gone before, so that you can create real opportunity for people, that was the goal of the whole program, creating opportunity where it did not exist before. And I'm going to throw it back to you, Scott, to continue the program.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Carson. We appreciate that. And thank you for leading all of us in the Opportunity Zone Initiative while serving as secretary there at HUD. And we all know and saw the tremendous fruit that came about over the course of a couple of years there while we served in administration, and seeing projects come from the ground up into today, seeing them in full operating capacity has been a tremendous blessing for all of us. We know it's a lot of work yet to be done. And the people that we have on the panel today, as you know, Dr. Carson, are all experts in their own rights and opportunity zones, have played a tremendous role in the success of this initiative, starting with our dear buddy, Alfonso Costa Jr., who formerly served as Deputy Chief of Staff to Dr. Carson there at HUD, and was over all of the policy as well at HUD, and really was a driving force from a policy and rules and regulations standpoint in the Opportunity Zone Initiative, worked hand in hand and oftentimes led me in this initiative and taught me so much, and was a big part of the success of the Opportunity Zone Initiative across the country. Alfonso has a beautiful family, a wife, and a new son, and currently serves as the executive vice president at the Falcone Group, a multi-billion-dollar development firm where he is now leading the affordable and workforce housing initiative, as well as the P3 partnership. So Alfonso, we look forward to hearing from you. And we also have our man, Jeremy Keele from the Catalyst Group. Jeremy is the managing partner of the Catalyst Opportunity Funds, and formerly was also the president and CEO of the Sorensen Impact Center based at the university there, a think tank focused on social impact. And Jeremy was there from the beginning with the EIG when talking about the Opportunity Zone legislation and initiative, and has played a tremendous role in the success of this program across the country, and continues in real estate and impact investing with the Catalyst Fund. And Jeremy, we really appreciate your leadership in Opportunity Zones and look forward to hearing from you. And now we have, last but not least, and so impactful and effective, our friend Matt Wachter from as the Vice President of Finance and Development at the Eerie Downtown Development Corporation, has a tremendous story and testimony of how opportunity zones have been used there in Eerie, and we look forward to hearing from him. He's a tax lawyer by trade, went to Villanova, a great university, but has done great things in Eerie and other places around the country as it pertains to opportunity zones. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you. And I'm gonna start the discussion and really kind of build off of what Dr. Carson was speaking of, the creation of opportunity zones and the purpose for which opportunity zones came. And I wanna turn to Alfonso to add just his thoughts on the reason why opportunity zones were created more in a granular sense and how they've impacted the communities across America.
Thank you for that question, Scott. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you and my fellow panelists and Dr. Carson. Thank you so much for hosting us, as well as the ACI team. You know, when opportunity zones were created through the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you know, we were really excited for a multitude of reasons. Not only did we think that it would be a positive from an economic standpoint, but more importantly, from a social impact perspective, we're really encouraged by the spirit of the legislative language and its birthplace. And it's really a brainchild, or it was birthed by a collection of different historical policies. A lot of folks might be familiar with enterprise zones or empowerment zones, but this was a little bit more nuanced. And in my opinion, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I would think for a lot of those who have been exposed to or have experience in the opportunity zone space, I would think it's a more enhanced or improved version of those historical policies that I just referenced. And the reason for that is because it is, to use some of the phrasing or verbiage that you utilized earlier, Scott, is that it is in fact privately led, in the sense that the private sector it's really incumbent upon them to drive where the money goes. However, it's really the local community, existing residents, advocates, and various entities, whether it be public housing authorities or local community development corporations, the like, that steer where dollars go from a sense of ideation and goal sharing that is really important for the revitalization that is outlined as the main goal of the Opportunity Zones initiative. And there are, you know, a multitude of benefits from the tax side, especially as it relates to the ability to defer your capital gains, various incremental benefits depending on when in fact you're able to invest your eligible capital gains, whether they be short-term or long-term, into a qualified opportunity fund, whether it be if you invested into a fund before the end of 2019, eligible for the 15% decrease or decrement on your capital gains tax liability if you hold onto your investment into that fund until the end of 2026, so for a 7-year period. Additionally, if you did not have the chance to invest your eligible capital gains into a fund before the end of 2019, you could still benefit from a decrease in your capital gains tax liability if you put your eligible gains into a fund before the end of this year and hold on for 5 years, again, with the end date of December 31st, 2026, giving you the 10% decrease. But arguably, the most impactful and what we appreciated the most, at least as a part of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, was the one tax benefit that was geared most towards long-term investment and sustainable growth, and that is the 10-year hold benefit. So regardless if you invested before the end of 2019, if you invest this year, or during the last year before that 2026 date, so as long as you've held on to your investment into a qualified opportunity fund for 10 years, and it could be December 30th of 2026, and you've held on to your investment fast forward 10 years later, December 30th of 2036, you're eligible for 100% step up in basis on any appreciation that you've gotten as it relates to or vis-a-vis your investment into the qualified opportunity fund. And so that really, we think, was an important component of what would drive long-term, long vision growth, and a commitment that typically investors don't like to or typically see themselves doing from an investment standpoint. Now, those in the low-income housing tax credit space are more accustomed to it, especially given the fact that the low-income housing tax credits are paid off or paid out to tax credit equity investors over a 10-year period. But beyond that, there are no other real similarities in the investment space and as it relates to federal tax benefits. But again, it was something that was birthed from a confluence of different ideas, but it was really Dr. Carson, Scott, and a lot of folks at the table from the Opportunity Revitalization Council, but even more importantly, individuals like Matt, Jeremy, and others that brought it into practice from the private sector in consultation with, in collaboration and coordination with a lot of nonprofit entities and a lot of existing residents. So
thank you, Foz, and we really appreciate you giving that history and also the tax incentive, the step up in basis, because as Dr. Carson said earlier, there's a lack of knowledge that we need to continue to promote about opportunity zones and how they work and how the tax incentives work. So thank you for laying that out as well as the benefits of it. So Jeremy and Matt, I want to bring you guys in, and because as Fonz said, you guys have really been the ones with a group of people that have taken this incentive, taken the initiative, and really put it into work in the private sector. And so, Jeremy, I want to call on you right now, and then on Matt to talk to us about what your groups or your entities have done thus far to utilize the Opportunity Zone initiative. And with that, you know, what have been some of the challenges and successes? So, Jeremy, if you'll start out for us, we'll appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Scott, and thanks for everybody, you know, joining the conversation. It's great to be a part of this. Any chance I get to speak alongside Scott Turner, I jump at, because he's a hero of mine, and he's one of these guys that makes you feel better about yourself just being around him.
Well, thank you.
I always enjoy the association, and Dr. Carson, it's good to be with you, and Alfonso and Matt as well. And Dr. Carson, thanks for hosting the conversation. So, you know, I run a firm, a co-managing partner, co-founder of a firm that really organized around, you know, the Opportunity Zone program early on, kind of, you know, 2018, roughly, we started to kind of organize this. We made our first investment in 2019. To date, we've raised over $200 million for the strategy. And when I check in with Novogradac, our tax and accounting firm that has a pretty good finger on the pulse of what's happening in the market, I think that that puts us, you know, in the top, I don't know, 1 or 2% of funds nationally in terms of the OZ space. So it's been a very successful strategy for us. We're over halfway deployed on the 200 million that we've raised. We're in about a dozen assets. And really, I think the you know, the secret sauce or kind of the differentiator for us as a firm is that we're extremely intentional about, you know, double bottom line investing or impact investing, as Scott mentioned a minute ago, meaning that we look for opportunities that return both a positive and very attractive financial return to our investors, but where our capital and our investment can also make a really, you know, positive difference for the community or for the environment or both. You know, we've leaned into that strategy. We didn't know when we launched the fund if that would resonate with capital, with, you know, developer partners, other stakeholders, and I think we've been really kind of gratified to find out that it's been a great calling card for us with capital. It's been a huge differentiator for us with developers, with sponsors that we provide capital to in our target markets. And we found kind of a, you know, community of practice or a cohort of developers who are very aligned, who are successful, great track record delivering really successful projects in their communities, but who are also really thoughtful about, you know, kind of addressing, you know, community needs, whether that's affordability, whether that's, you know, healthy food options in a food desert, you know, medical clinics in a medical desert, you know, all the kinds of things that you talk about in the community development context. So we've been really happy to find in the, I don't know, you know, 10 or so markets that we're active in around the country, you know, without any exception, at least 4 or 5 really, you know, high performing kind of best in class developers that are aligned with our capital in those markets. So, so that's been great. You know, one thing that we sort of point to that I think has been pretty, innovative and helpful as we've done the work is we take a very quantitative approach to the impact. And, both on the front end of an investment when we're underwriting it, we'll do a very, data-driven, what we call a community needs assessment, which is really looking at a bunch of socioeconomic and demographic characteristics of a neighborhood that we're looking to invest in to identify where are the gaps, like what does that community need, at least on paper, as the data can help us tell that story. And then we do a very kind of rigorous impact scoring, process or procedure on the project itself. And what we're trying to do is look for opportunities to invest in a real estate project that addresses those, identified community needs. And from our perspective, that's a home run if we can do that. And then once we make the investment, we look to do ongoing, impact reporting and measurement to our investors, along a series of metrics that we've identified for each asset that really try to tell that story, again, in a very data-driven way. Challenges, there are plenty of challenges, depending on the day. I feel like there's more challenges than successes sometimes, but this is a new investment category, and we've been bringing kind of a new investment product in a new category to the capital markets and doing a lot of educating along the way, certainly along with the other folks here on the panel. So there's been a lot of education that's been required for people to understand the tax incentive, for people to understand, what is it like from a risk return, investment perspective to invest in low to moderate income communities. Most of the, LPs, investors that we work with have never put capital into these kinds of communities before. So there's a lot of education around that. And then the other big, kind of structural challenge that you get in opportunity zones, and if you talk to any of my peers, kind of in the, capital management or, capital aggregation, industry in this space, they'll, I'm sure, say the same thing, which is that you're raising capital on a very sort of fixed timeline because your investors have this, shot clock to put the dollars to work. And in the meantime, you're trying to match that capital that's on that timeline with very real capital needs for very real projects in these communities that you're trying to invest in. And there's a real art and a science to kind of matching up the capital with the needs of that project at roughly the same time. And so I think one reason we've been able to be successful is that we recognized that challenge really early on, and we just knew that was going to be one of our, one of the sort of determinants of our success, if you will. And so I think we've been able to, be really good at that. The regulatory uncertainty that I think is going to come up, later in the call, I think is part of it. That goes to the, cap gains tax rate, which we can talk about. The 1031 program, what's going to happen with that? The OZ program itself, does it get extended? Does the Biden administration want to do away with it in some form or fashion? Are there amendments to it? All that kind of stuff. Investors hate uncertainty, and all those kind of big question marks have been a headwind, I think, for most of us in the industry. And I think we have good answers to a lot of that stuff. We try to inform ourselves on where things stand, but the more certainty on some of that stuff, the better. There's other, unique challenges to, or general challenges to real estate, not specific to OZs, but with the incredible run up in commodity prices and labor prices and things like that, it's been really tough to kind of manage around construction pricing and timing uncertainty and things like that. But that's not specific to the OZ.
Right.
Just real quick, what I would end on, just at least from my perspective, on the successes side of the ledger is, again, we've been really sort of gratified and happy and pleased to find so many like-minded developers out there that are doing good work in their communities. And one of the things that we're sort of taking on, at Catalyst, even though it's not sort of necessarily core to the mission, I think it's good for the firm and for the community, is convening a lot of those kind of like-minded developers who sit in silos in places like Nashville and Pittsburgh and Salt Lake and other places, doing good work, but rarely get the opportunity to kind of, engage with their peers from other markets and share best practices. And so, we've put some effort into kind of convening those, community-driven developers and helping them have a venue to kind of share those best practices. And then just on the last piece on the successes front is I think we've been really gratified and happy to see how much capital there is out there that's motivated by this program, both because of the tax, benefit that they see in it, but also, again, I think, just as important is the opportunity that folks, even sort of traditional investors that don't identify as impact investors, but the opportunity that they see to, make a positive difference in, sort of disinvested, overlooked communities that they've driven through, grew up in, been a part of over the years. They see this as a really remarkable opportunity to kind of, get capital off the sidelines and into those communities. Yeah. So that's been a great, really heartwarming thing to see as well.
That's excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. Really appreciate your thoughtfulness and your leadership in this space, and how you and your firm at Catalyst have been, and I've known this, and we all know, have been focused on the spirit of the law and the spirit of the council, both economic development and community social impact, as Fonz made reference to earlier. And, oftentimes when we were there in the administration talking with Secretary Carson and Fonz and our team, we always recognize the ones that were carrying out the spirit of the law. So thank you for what you all are doing and continue to do, and also for convening people that don't have the same opportunities or exposure, for bringing them in. We really appreciate you doing that. So thank you for the great work. Now, my man, Matt, from the Eerie Development Corporation, we want to hear from you, Matt. What are you guys doing, and how are you utilizing, as Jeremy referenced to, utilizing the OZ initiative and some of the successes that you've seen thus far there in Eerie?
To everyone, thank you for the opportunity today. Dr. Carson, thank you. And thank you to ACI for hosting, Scott for emceeing. We've really been on a positive trajectory since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. And one of the main reasons why is our designation locally in our downtown as a federal opportunity zone. And why? We're a nonprofit. So the EDDC is a nonprofit, and our charitable mission, believe it or not, is to restore and revitalize the downtown core of the city of Eerie, primarily through real estate development. And the question is, why do you need a nonprofit to do real estate development? And the answer is, it is incredibly, incredibly challenging place to do it. The median income where we're working is about $10,800 a year. One of our projects is a $25.5 million project. It appraised at $7.7 million. This is not a place where most people come to get rich on real estate. And that creates a lot of issues, because we are a community that needs investment, and we're a community that needs investment into these just core functions. We're a city that has a housing stock of 45,000, 6,500 of those single family homes are vacant or abandoned, and another 9,500 of that 45,000 are moderately to severely blighted. We need investment into real estate. We need investment into housing. We have a big housing stock, but it's absolutely underutilized and underinvested in. Now, that said, what have opportunity zones done for us? I think it's really been what we've tried to do, and what we are starting to have quite a bit of success in, very fortunately, is really capturing the power of a tax incentive. It's not a program, it's not a grant. You don't need to apply and wait your turn. There's no application. Capturing the power of an incentive to bring capital into a place that really needs it. And what we're doing is real estate development. So we've concentrated our development into the central business district of the city, and it's the core of the city. And we've acquired quite a bit of property within a 3.5 block square radius in downtown. And right now we have 478,000 square feet of real estate development underway. 8 of the properties are historic. There's going to be 140 new residential units. There's going to be 25 new businesses. We estimate about 250 new jobs created in this footprint. Right now, there's about 200 people working in the construction trades right outside my window.
Excellent.
Our most, I think, impactful project that we have is going to be the first done, and that is a grocery store and a food hall, right, in a USDA registered certified food desert. And that is a tremendous story here for this surrounding area, where we're working. 95% of the housing is affordable or subsidized, and there's an apartment building, right, I'm looking at it right now outside this window, that has 150 residents, and it's primarily elderly or people with handicaps that live in this space. But there's nowhere to buy food, right? So they're going to Dollar General, they're going to Rite Aid, and there's nowhere to buy healthy, fresh food. We're building a grocery store right next door, and these people who live there and in the surrounding area are going to be able to go and get fresh produce, fresh head of lettuce, buy cabbage, things. I mean, it's going to have a tremendous impact on these people's day-to-day lives. Well, how did we do it, or how are we getting there? The project's about 75% complete. So this grocery store and food hall, there are 28 residential apartment units on the upper floors, and it should be done at the end of October. So we're about 75% done. That's a big project, and that's the $25.5 million project we're working on. All in all, there's about $100 million in development activity underway. We raised initially $27.5 million of local capital. It's not OZ capital, but it's this local first skin in the game capital that said, look, we have to reinvest back into ourselves as a community because no one was going to come and save us. And this funding was put together with, I think, a real mission behind it. One, we've got to get them a return, right? So it's managing, there's a private equity fund. However, it said we're willing to be the first in, and we're really willing to be that transformational capital that's, I think, essential to attracting any other dollars into a place like Eerie, where you've got that sort of soft real estate market that makes deals really hard to cash flow, or you don't have the institutional investors in the place that are used to investing into the community. So we got in, we were able to acquire quite a bit of real estate and do that hard work. And I mean hard work, the actual getting in there and gutting these buildings out, or figuring out how they can cash flow, doing the really, sophisticated financial modeling so that we could understand what type of revenues these projects could generate. What's the value of the depreciation in a project? Some of these how's the waterfall look on a deal, right? You've really got to get into the weeds. Yeah. What the OZ designation allowed us to do, though, it became a rallying point for the whole community, but we were able to grab a hold of it and find dollars, two big buckets of dollars. One, additional local capital that wouldn't necessarily have invested those monies back in Eerie, and then two, national capital follow that. And that's allowed us to now put together a really sort of tremendously impactful investment as a whole across the entire central business district. And I think the important point is that it gets these investments over the hump. So it can help add to your IRR. It can help add to your return. But it can also get you on the radar of dollars that necessarily weren't looking at a place like Eerie before. So there is a class of investors. And I actually think it's an interesting coincidence, the fact that there's really been a rise in what's called impact investing, right? But it's really gone, that rise in impact investing, the timing of it has really come along with OZ. And I think it's opened up the eyes of a lot of people in finance to looking at investments in places like Eerie that they haven't before. It's a tool, and it's an incentive. And if it's used properly, and if you're able to structure it in a way, typically with your own skin in the game, you can get these deals over the hump. And we're pretty excited about it in the downtown core of Eerie.
Thank you, Matt. And we have seen personally, I know Dr. Carson and I have been to Eerie there to speak. And it is a beautiful downtown area with so much potential. We even went on other parts of Eerie. I've toured the buildings that you're talking about that have been repurposed. And I know how not just intrigued, but encouraged Dr. Carson and I were there to see what you all were doing at the EDDC. Thank you for your leadership on that. And thank you for your explanation on how a city that is the second poorest zip code, I think you said, in the country, could come together with local investment, national investment, but really with a mission and a purpose, and utilize the Opportunity Zone Initiative to do great work. So we really
don't cut us short. We're poorest zip code in the country.
Oh, I said the second. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take that away.
When it's a race to the bottom, we were so excited. We didn't want to be second. We didn't want to be third. If we're going to be at the bottom of the barrel, might as well just hit it.
Well, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. The poorest zip code in all of the country. But thank you for the great work.
Thank you.
And I know that Dr. Carson enjoyed his time there. So, Dr.
There was a bakery that was started as part of that project. How are they doing?
It's going very well. So we have we're going to begin operations at the end of October. We'll be substantially complete. So probably people in about Thanksgiving, and the bakery is a great part of this project. I'm very excited.
Fantastic. Yeah,
wonderful.
Great.
Hey, that's new jobs. And, you know, you have part-time construction workers that are working right now, taking care of their families. And, you know, that's part of the initiative of Opportunity Zones is job creation, you know, new businesses, whether it be full-time or part-time. And those are honest wages being earned to take care of the families of America. And to talk about that even right now is very encouraging. So,
well, Scott, you probably remember when we were in Dallas at that supermarket that had opened up, providing over 100 jobs for people in the neighborhood who formerly didn't have a good place to go.
That's right. It was and you're right, Dr. Carson. There was a old strip mall on the west side of Dallas, and Ray Washburn and his group bought this strip mall and repurposed it and built a grocery store that's open from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. And now they have 100 new jobs right here. And it's a grocery store where there was no healthy grocery store at all. So yes, sir, right. You're right. We have seen this come to fruition and very grateful for that. So Dr. Carson, as I have you right here before me, what are in your mind going forward? And we've talked about this, you and Alfonso and I and others on our team. What going forward needs to be done to further enhance the Opportunity Zone initiative? What can we do, and what can people outside of the private sector do?
Well, you know, the ideal was absolutely a spectacular ideal. And what needs to happen is that people need to know about it. And the current administration, I don't think I've ever heard any of them mention the word Opportunity Zone. Fortunately, they still exist. The investments are still good. And, you know, the concept remains an extremely viable and promising one. But I think all of us need to use whatever mechanisms we have to make people aware of it. And one of the things that we really want to emphasize also is that there's a great deal more money in the private sector than there is in the federal government. Or at least there used to be, until they started printing money and throwing it all over the place. And really, that's the money that we really need, the private sector money for those long-term investments, because one of the real keys to Opportunity Zone is the long-term aspect. If you're taking a substantial amount of money and you're putting it into a place, you're not going to come back 10 years later and see how it's going. You're going to stay invested in what's going on there. You're going to continue to put input in there and be a contributor to the success of that endeavor. And that, of course, will cause other endeavors to spring up around it. And this is what people need to understand. You know, this has nothing to do with Republicans or Democrats. This has to do with bringing opportunities to fruition for the many people who need them in our nation.
That's a good word, Dr. Carson. Opportunity zones transcend politics. Because poverty doesn't have a party. And when gentlemen like yourselves on this panel and others that have been involved in opportunity zones, and all of us have been together at one point in time over the last 2 or 3 years, and we never talk about whether it's red or blue. We always talk about this is the problem, and we have a solution to bring together. And that's the beauty of opportunity zones. And I think us being megaphones and amplifying that and having developers such as Alfonso and his group out there that are continuing to develop and build in distressed communities and bring revitalization and bring this message of transformation is what we need to continue to do along with your point. So thank you, Dr. Carson, on your remarks on that. And we do publicly, we need to encourage the current administration, to continue and to amplify this message, because people in this country benefit from it. Gentlemen, anybody, Fonz or Matt or Jeremy, Fonz, you got anything to add to this?
No, I think that's 100% correct. I couldn't agree more with Dr. Carson or you, Scott, or Matt and Jeremy, for that matter. But a lot of people seem to forget, because of various news outlets and newspapers decide to position the Opportunity Zones initiative in a certain light. But again, people forget that it was really Senators Tim Scott and Cory Booker, Republican and Democrat, working across the aisle to come up with the original legislative language that was known as the Investing in Opportunity Act. And although the exact language that was a part of that bill wasn't eventually adopted by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, I think the core mission and breadth of that original bill was in fact enacted. And so, there are a lot of phenomenal organizations out there. One being Accelerator for America, which is another nonprofit based out of California. My good friend Aaron Thomas is the CEO and head of, and Mayor Eric Garcetti is on the board, former Mayor of Indiana, current Secretary of the Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, is on the board as well. Again, not Trump administration people, but helping the cause as Accelerated for America has been really pivotal and instrumental in helping localities create what's known as investment prospectuses and coming together to create plans, kind of a hybrid of, private placement memorandums or memos, and also community revitalization tools or toolkits, in order to, again, bridge that divide that oftentimes plagues cities and counties or rural areas, just for a lack of communication and collaboration purposes. And so it really, as you said, Scott, is not a blue or red or Democrat or Republican issue. And that's what's so beautiful about Opportunity Zones.
I want guys to go to the discussion that Jeremy brought up, and in our last few minutes here, I want to bring up the topic of some of the things that at the federal level, from a tax standpoint, that are being proposed, and what are some of those changes that you're hearing about, and how would they potentially affect or impact Opportunity Zone investing? And Jeremy, I'll start with you to give brief remarks on that, and then we can chime in with the other fellows.
Yeah, you guys are more of the policy wonks than I am, but certainly for me, it's the cap gains tax rate. It's the big, it's the big driver. And when we talk to investors, again, having uncertainty around what that looks like is the hindrance. I think if people sort of understand where that's going to land, then they can kind of make decisions on that basis. And by the way, from an Opportunity Zone perspective, the cap gains tax rate going up actually cuts both ways, right? Because on the one hand, you'll hear investors say, well, maybe I want to, pay the tax now because the cap gains tax rate is lower now than it might be in the future. But on the other hand, 10 years from now, when you exit an OZ investment, the value of that incentive effectively went up considerably because you're not paying tax on a higher cap gains tax rate 10 years from now. So it cuts both ways. It's not clear cut how that should affect investor decision. But again, I think the lack of clarity is the bigger issue. And I would just say, just as a footnote to this, and then I'll be quiet. But we got a stat, and I wish I had. I was looking for it as I was preparing for this, but we got a stat from a big tax and accounting firm that tracks a lot of OZ investment the other day. And somebody had put the question to them, like, how big is the OZ program relative to the New Markets Tax Credit Program and the LIHTC program, Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program, both of which have been around for decades and are important kind of tools of community development. And again, I don't remember exactly what the number is. One of you guys may know it better, but it was like the OZ program was already dwarfing these other kind of community benefit, tax credit driven programs. So I think that speaks to the power and the potential and the promise of the program. We'd be happy to see some things get tweaked on the margins. If some of the more affluent zones need to, be cut out of the list, I think that could make some sense. There's been some talk of community benefit reporting and accountability. Obviously, we think of our firm as sort of a leader in that space. So we would, as kind of a, competitive advantage matter, we would welcome that sort of a reform. But we'd love to see the program get extended. And I know there's been some discussion in Congress among the original sponsors and now some others around, pushing back some of the deadlines, kind of renewing the program and again, tweaking on the margins and dialing it in for more impact. But we think it's a powerful tool and another tool in the toolbox to really help low to moderate income communities get back on their feet. So that's why I'd leave it right there. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, excellent, Jeremy. Thank you for your remarks on that. And we're in agreement. All those things have been talked about, for quite some time about the extension and redoing the zones and adding zones. And so we're hopeful because it is such a powerful tool and a powerful incentive that has impacted our country. So we're hopeful that these things will continue ahead, and we'll all be encouraging those that are in decision-making positions to do so. Matt or Fonz, y'all have anything briefly to add to that, to this discussion about the potential and how it can affect OZs?
Just a few thoughts, Scott. One, so we are working with a number of investors right now, and it was mentioned that the risk of capital gains rate changing, and it's having uncertainty creates big challenges because this is the last thing that people want. So whenever there's uncertainty, there's risk. You can't plan for it. You just can't accurately project what returns could be on very, very challenging projects. Yeah. And it's funny, some of the investors that we've been talking to, they won't even pass on that risk to the little old nonprofit developers. So there's a big indecision and uncertainty creates a lot of issues that can stall progress, and that's a big unfortunate dynamic to a lot of this. And it's interesting, we're talking a lot about taxes, right? And we're forgetting half the story. We're talking about federal taxes. Well, there's state and local. And you talk about this being essentially, this isn't a Republican policy. This isn't a Democratic policy. This is just a policy that's good. And I think that can be reflected in the fact that this really helps shore up local tax bases. Yeah. So in a community like Eerie, this has been something that's been rallied, right? The whole community's been behind this. So our local chamber of commerce, our city hall, Erie's not a red city. This is a Democratic stronghold for 60 years, like many of our urban cities, but there's been a recognition that we need investment. And at the end of the day, the projects that we're doing, for example, they pay the property that we bought pays $186,000 a year in real estate property tax. That funds our city, our county, and our school district. And for 99.99% of the people, those are the things they really care about. Are the potholes filled? Is a fire truck going to come? Are you buying good textbooks in our school district? Well, that's all funded by real estate property tax.
Right.
And now OZ isn't just limited to real estate, but there is obviously a huge component of that to what we're doing. When we're done, these properties are going to pay, we think, about $2 million a year. So think about what that means for a local community. And it's oftentimes, I think when you don't have a long form discussion like this, when you talk about policy in 30-second sound bites, you're just thinking up here at this federal level, and you're talking about capital gains. And really, it's a deferral of tax is what it is, and a minimal step up in basis to get money into places like Eerie, and you could potentially shore up the local tax bases of places like Eerie, where we had we had a population of 140,000 in the 60s. We're down to 95-ish thousand today. And when the new census data comes out soon, I'm hoping we break 90,000. So it's a really important thing. It's not a Republican policy. It's not a Democratic policy. This is really a boom for these local governments and local infrastructure, which is what I think most people are concerned about.
Great. Thank you, Matt. We appreciate it. And thank you for what you guys are doing in Eerie. Fonz, did you have anything to add to that briefly? And then we'll go on to Dr. Carson.
No, I don't think so, other than, Jeremy mentioned earlier in this conversation about potential do away with the 1031 exchange, which is specific to real estate nowadays, and much more, I would say, narrow tax break program for those in the real estate space. But if in fact it is rid of at some juncture, it would only further drive or direct capital into the qualified opportunity fund space, in my opinion, especially given the much less set of parameters or prescriptive type of investment that must occur. With 1031, you have to have a like kind asset exchange. And so, again, you could be taking eligible capital gains from selling stock or selling real estate, anything that's short or long-term capital gains, and putting it into a qualified opportunity fund and not subject to that aspect. The time frames are also a lot different, with the 1031, the replacement period, in terms of identifying the asset that you're going to roll your funds into, as well as actually executing on the deal. A lot more kind of fluid, I would say, from the qualified opportunity fund investment standpoint, which we won't get into those on this conversation. But again, it should be very interesting to see what plays out in the coming months, how it is intended to actually pay for a bipartisan infrastructure bill and any impending or thereafter, or any subsequent or thereafter potential reconciliation bill. But it should be fun to watch.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you for allowing me to moderate this tremendous discussion. And as we all know, opportunity zones are revolutionary in the sense of what they've done for our country so far and what they'll continue to do. So thank you for all of your work, both on a local and national level. Thank you for your sacrifice and for your time. And it's always a joy to be with you, and to be on this distinguished panel today was a great joy for me. And what I want to do now is to give the last thought to Dr. Carson, the chairman of American Cornerstone Institute, and our leader here today. So Dr. Carson, if you have a final word, sir, I'll turn it over to you now.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Scott, for an excellent job of moderating. And
Yes,
thank you to Matt and Jeremy for your contribution. Fonz, who rapidly became the subject matter expert in opportunity zones, for the tremendous job that was done that's helpful to people all over the country. And one of the things that Council on Economic Advisors pointed out is that opportunity zones to date are expected to lift 1 million people out of poverty. And isn't that what it's all about? And increase the property values by 1.1%. That's billions of dollars of equity into the pockets of some of the poor citizens in our country. These are the kind of programs that we need to be doing, focusing on. Those are the things that decrease wealth gaps and put people on the right trajectory. And really, that's what it's all about. There are a lot of peripheral benefits that we've talked about, but it's really about the people and providing them with opportunities.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Carson, for your leadership and for your remarks. And now, everyone, on behalf of Dr. Ben Carson and the American Cornerstone Institute, this is Scott Turner thanking you for joining us for this Cornerstone conversation. And please go to AmericanCornerstone.org for this and other Cornerstone conversations. And thank you to all of our donors for making these conversations possible and making American Cornerstone Institute the great policy institute that it is. We really appreciate you. We look forward to joining you again. And please don't hesitate to reach out to ACI if you have any questions or needs or want to support and give to this tremendous initiative. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you all.